Hello friends and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're going to make an old school Southern chocolate pie. So what you see on my counter is what we're going to use to make this. Really, there's not a lot going on here. You're going to need a pie crust, which you can actually make your own or you can get the frozen. And the rest of this is just the ingredients that are going in the pie, and there aren't that many. I mean, totally here you have 7 different things going into this, and they all work together to give this great, amazing, made at home taste that isn't like the box that you get, because we know the boxes just, you mix it up, you throw it in, it's done. But there's something to making this from scratch and doing the old school method. It just has that kind of great taste to it. So we're going to start out with our pie crust. I have one that was frozen. I thawed this for 20 minutes before I started doing this, and I'm going to use a fork to poke holes in the bottom, so that way when this bakes it won't actually rise up in the center or anything or bubble up, so we don't want that to happen. So when we are done poking the holes in this, we're going to put this in an oven at 375 degrees for 12 to 15 minutes, so that way we can let it bake off before we start using it. Next we're going to use a block of chocolate, which we're going to cut up. Now most people don't do this. I actually add this to give a little burst of flavor. This is like the almond bark stuff that you buy at the grocery store, because you get a really huge block of this that's in individual blocks within that. Basically this is anywhere from a fourth to a fifth of a cup of chocolate cut up. You can use as much as you want. And I'm basically just taking a very large knife, pushing through this, breaking it into smaller pieces. So that way when it goes into my pan that I'm cooking in, it's just going to melt down a little faster. Just need to make sure that, it's cut up in pieces that are small enough to melt at a decent rate, because we don't want to put the whole big block in there. It'll take forever for it to melt down. And then once it's all done, we're just going to set this to the side for a moment, because we're not going to need it immediately. And we're going to move on to the next step of this. Now, this is our crust. It's already been baked. It's ready to set aside and just cool while we're doing the rest of this. But it's there, it's ready. Just put it somewhere where it's safe, and then we're going to move on to actually mixing up the ingredients that are going to go in. So I have a really large skillet here that I'm going to cook this in, and I'm going to add like all the ingredients almost at once here. So we're going to add into this 1 cup of sugar, a third of a cup of flour, which is basically all purpose, and a third of a cup of cocoa powder. Now once we get this in, we want to mix it up a little bit to make sure that there aren't any large lumps in here to start with, because we want to make sure we break it up, make sure everything's incorporated, move it around, just to make sure, as you're doing this later, you don't see large pieces of clumped up cocoa or sugar that you didn't realize were that way to begin with. And then when we get this done, we're going to bring some milk into this, because you're going to need 2 1/4 cups of milk. And I'm using whole milk in this because it just works better to do this. Now mind you, we still had some butter and we had some vanilla extract, but those are going to come in much later. So go ahead and just move your whisk through that a little bit first, and then we're going to bring in the milk. Now when I put the milk in, I'm not putting it all in at one time. I'm just going to put it in there just about like, enough to actually start incorporating this stuff together. So maybe, not even a cup to start with, and then I'll come in again and again just to add all the milk into it. But I want to actually mix this together and get it started mixing up before I turn the heat on to this, because if you don't do it, you might end up with a lot of lumps in this. You don't really want a lumpy pie. So just go ahead and mix it up. And when you get to a point where you're adding in the last of the milk, that's when you're going to want to turn the heat onto this, and we're going to go on medium heat. So just get everything mixed up first, and then we'll go to the point where we actually turn on the heat. Because when you're mixing this up, if you had a lot of this sitting in the bottom and it's not really moving around, you run the risk of burning it. And I don't know if you've ever tasted burnt chocolate, but it is not pleasant. So we just want to make sure that it's really mixed up well before we do anything like that. So just keep mixing it and stirring it through. Now once we do turn on the heat to this, and we're going to have it, like I said, on medium heat, you're going to have to stir this pretty continuously. It's like, you don't have to do it like every second of the time, but you need to pay attention to this, because we don't want anything sitting on the bottom and burning, as I said. But you're going to have to stir this around for about 20 minutes, because as you're doing this and you're cooking it, it's going to start to thicken at one point, and that's when you know when you're about done. But it takes about 20 minutes for that to happen. So you want to keep stirring it. You want to make sure there's no lumps. You just want to make sure that you continuously move this around. We just don't want it to sit there for, 5 minutes without being touched, because you're definitely going to make a mistake at that point. So just keep stirring this in, and once you get all your milk in there, like I said, turn the heat on. But as this is coming up here in temperature, after we start seeing a little bit of heat coming in, that's when we're going to add in the actual pieces of chocolate that we cut up. So go ahead and continue stirring and mixing this. The best thing about it is, as you're doing this, and if you're using a whisk, you can tell if you have lumps in this or not, and you really do not want lumps. That's the bad part about it, because the lumps are just going to show in your pie, and So I just put in the last of my milk, and I am still stirring this up, and the heat is coming on to medium at this point. So we just want to make sure that this is really whisked through really well. And as maybe like you've had this going for about like maybe 3-4 minutes, maybe 5, then you can go ahead and put in the chopped up pieces of chocolate. Now, as you can see, this is pretty smooth at this point, which is great. Now, when this chocolate goes in, the best thing about this is we cut it up small. It's going to melt pretty quickly. It's not going to be a problem, and it's basically going to just like mix into what you already had in there. The best thing about that chocolate is, for the cut up part, it has a really good flavor to it, and it's just going to add to the cocoa just to give it a little bit more of what it needs to kind of have that great taste of homemade. So just keep mixing it. As you can see, mine is getting really hot at this point. This is several minutes in, and like I said, you still have to keep stirring this. But when you get to the 20-minute marker, it's going to be really evident that you've gotten to the point where this has really started to thicken, because as you keep whisking it, it'll start looking like pudding, and there you go. Now when you get to this point, turn off the heat. Then you're going to add 3 tablespoons of butter and 1 tablespoon of vanilla, and we're going to whisk this all together to make sure that the butter is completely melted and that vanilla goes throughout the whole thing. And then after that, we're going to pour this into the crust that we already prepared, and then we're going to refrigerate anywhere from like 2 to 3 hours, because we want to give this time to set up and chill and do its thing, because we want it solid. We don't want it runny and falling apart on us when we're cutting it. So when you get it to this point where this is really stirred up, we're going to just move it right over into our crust. And at this point, you are pretty much done. This is the whole process, and as I said before, it's really not hard. This is a great thing to make, especially for the holidays coming up, for Thanksgiving, Christmas, anything like that. It's a wonderful thing to have. And there you go. Now my pie crust was like a 9-inch thing. See, it filled it up really well, and this is what it looks like. This is such a wonderful thing, and this is what mine looked like on a plate. And I gotta tell you, this had such an amazing taste, and I really think you just might like this. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. And if you get a chance, check out the Southern Mountain Kitchen website, where you can get a free recipe, check out the cookbooks available from the Southern Mountain Kitchen, and if you'd like to, you could order a cookbook at a discounted price, cheaper than Amazon, with shipping that is also cheaper than Amazon. So if you get a chance, check it out, and I hope you have a great day.